welcome to the 40th edition of Podcasters. Today with Arte Merritt. Arte, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, all the way from California, huh?
Yeah, San Francisco. I just, as we mentioned, just got back from Japan too. So,
Traveling the world.
yeah.
Artie and I, for the listeners and viewers, Artie and I already met this March in Edinburgh, where we also did a short podcast. Artie was one of the speakers there. And you were not, no, you were a speaker or not?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
you were a speaker.
Yeah.
I remember correct. Anyway, we had a really great talk then, and apparently something was cooking, and you brought something new to the market. And this edition of a podcast is a little bit different than normal. We won't be testing a chatbot, but we will be looking at the solution you're bringing out there, because I saw it and I read into it, and I really think you're solving a basic problem which our community has, and I'd like to bring this out there and help our community do better with your solution, hopefully. Reconify, that's a new company, right?
Yeah, so yeah, Reconify, we're doing analytics for generative AI applications.
Um, I haven't heard anyone doing this before.
Oh no, I get super excited about it. My background's been in like doing analytics quite a few times. So one of the first startups I had was a mobile analytics company back during like the mobile heyday, doing mobile web and mobile app analytics. And then a bit more recently, I was doing the chatbot and voice assistant analytics. And there's a big change because it was unstructured data. It wasn't just clicking links and buttons that you did in say mobile web and apps. But now when you go to generative AI, it's yet another shift because now it's unstructured both on the inbound and outbound responses, and you can have images and everything else that people are you know generating and manipulating beyond just text. So it's pretty exciting space.
So for you, it was logical to go to the next step and move up to generative AI. But what I find I didn't see any solution yet in the market doing this, or any company doing this. In my opinion, you're the first or one of the first. Um, and so please explain what it is exactly that Reconify does, and how do you do it, and how do people that deploy chatbots or have chatbot platforms integrate your solution in their solutions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it might be easiest to share that via the demo if that's good. Yeah.
Well, first explain, and then you explain a little bit deeper with the demo.
Yeah, fair enough. So basically, Reconify is an analytics platform for generative AI to help you better understand the responses based on different prompts. So whether those are the user prompts, the system prompts, any of the prompts that you're creating, you often hear the terms prompt engineering. And so folks that are experimenting with different prompts to get responses, here's a way to see how effective those are. And if you do have an application like a chatbot application, it can help you show how the chatbot is actually responding to the user. But it doesn't have to be chatbots. It can be, writing marketing messages or manipulating images or creating images, any of that kind of stuff.
So basically any application that uses an LLM
or generative AI, like
generative AI,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
could use your application. And
yeah.
is it limited to English or any language? Or
Any language right now that OpenAI would support, and then we want to add other providers as well. So at least initially with OpenAI. And then the way it works is it's a pretty simple integration. It can just show that real quick too. It's just if you wrote your application in Node, there's an npm module. If you wrote it in Python, there's a pip module, and it ends up being like 2 lines of code. You include the module, and in this case, it's with OpenAPI. You're passing OpenAPI's object in, and then we just take care of the rest. It's sending the data behind the scenes. So it's pretty neat because that's how you're able to pick up latency too. So there's things like there's and I'll show this in the demo. There's metrics, some folks are interested in the standard stuff around users and sessions and whatnot. But then when you start using something like an OpenAI, people are concerned about the token usage because you charge on the token. So you might want to know like how many tokens did this use and what was the underlying charge per model. So now you can start to experiment too with like which model not only is more effective, but maybe more cost effective for you.
So
Uh,
that will help them optimize.
Yeah, so there's that kind of numeric metric stuff, but I think where it's most interesting is in the responses themselves. So it's unstructured. Users can say, or you can write whatever you want into these as prompts, and then the response is going to be unstructured coming back. And even sometimes the same prompts are going to generate different responses. So it's interesting to see that. So the first wave is for the platform is showing the analytics to show that stuff where things might be breaking down or not responding the way you like, or just analyzing whether it is responding the way you like. The next step after that is to start adding some of the guardrails. So,
Did you
if they
say
respond,
guardrails?
yeah,
Because that is one of the in almost every discussion we have about generative AI behind a chatbot, guardrails are like the thing, or the actually the lack of guardrails is the thing in the discussion why you can't, or it's very hard to implement it because you have no clue or no control over what it's spitting out.
yeah, it definitely that's where the guardrails can come in to help. So the first phase is just we'll get the analytics out, then start working on the guardrails to alert folks that maybe this is outside of what you would allow, whether that's um, because this PII, like personal identified information, is coming
Yeah,
back. It's not the
GDPR.
right, yeah, it's not the right tone, or it's not the tone of or voice of your company, and um, the idea is to start with alerting folks, and then it could be up to you how you want to handle that. Like, oh, don't let this response go back, or have a human jump in to look at it to okay it, or something like that, and then we can work on more automated stuff after. But at least the initial thing would be alerts. Um, there is something interesting though that I found with this generative AI as it applies to conversational AI, and I might have been a little guilty of this too. When folks ask like, how is generative AI used in conversational AI? Whereas initially seeing people use it, or companies use it, was around um, the creation of intent models, like the training phrases, like hey,
Intents and utterances.
yeah, exactly. When you want to come up with how are all the ways someone might say cancel my account, and you can use say a LLM or generative AI to do that, or as a form of fallback handling. And where one company was doing it, where I thought was interesting, was they weren't having the generative AI respond, but they were using it to expand what the person said to other variations of like what's my order status, right, or whatever it is. Expand that and see if any of those match an intent. And the concern, like when you brought up the guardrails, I think what some folks were thinking of generative AI is using it for fallback handling and having it respond. But the actual where it gets really interesting is to use the generative AI for the logic instead. So um, instead of creating an intent model, you can actually use generative AI to create the logic for your chatbot, and you can respond however you like instead of having it respond. I don't know if this is making sense, but
No, it
like,
makes sense because
yeah,
it's interesting because in I don't remember which podcast we had a discussion, and I said, "Isn't the generative AI the end of this part of the work of conversation designers, where and makes a change in all the platforms where we're not going to be busy with intents and utterances. We're going to use generative AI to do that for us, and it can do it a lot better. It takes less time, and in the end, it's cheaper and faster, and we have all these compliments, but there's also risks. And the problem is we can have the advantages, but we couldn't manage the risks. And here you are bringing this to the market where we are able to manage the risks because that is everybody's concern.
oh yeah, definitely. But one of the things that was neat, one of the things experimenting with a friend of mine was we and So instead of having the generative AI respond as the chatbot, instead you say, this is our experiment. We said, you're a travel chatbot. Oh, sorry, you're a travel assistant. You can answer, you know, questions about airline travel. That was the prompts, right? And then we immediately asked, hey, I want to change my flight from New York to go to SF. And it immediately said, well, what's your confirmation number? It knew the questions to ask. You didn't have to say like, oh, you have to create these things. You needed the entity around your confirmation number, the
So
two
it
and from
understands the
cities.
process.
Yeah, it understands all this stuff, right? And we said, well, instead of it responding to the user, it said, format the response in a JSON object that has the entities pulled out, like all this stuff. So it basically did all the logic for you. So you're still able to respond the way you want to. So that takes out the sort of risk of the generative AI responding in an inappropriate way because you're still creating the response. Now you're using generative AI to create the logic, right? Like that's what I thought was really neat. And all those platforms that are out there for building intent models and all that, you can do this so much easier now with generative AI because you don't have to spell out all the um, different training phrases. You don't have to try to figure out the entities, extracting all that stuff. You don't need to do that, which is pretty fascinating.
And the interesting thing is, uh, I think we discussed that in Edinburgh. There's so many bots that are not working properly because it doesn't understand you, and that's in part because of the intents and utterances. Because
Yeah,
the designers didn't think of putting it in there, or it wasn't a question that was asked before, so it has
yeah,
no clue. Um, and doing this, that actually solves that problem. So uh, the way I see this is that the customer experience or the user experience of a user of a chatbot with this behind it could become so much better because it does understand, it understands the logic and the process, etc., and it comes up with appropriate answers or information. Even if it's a specifically trained model, it should be able to do that, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah. So you can do like your customizations around a model, like the fine tuning, or you can do like I was mentioned, just using it for the that sort of a logic aspect of it, like replacing the traditional, say, dialogue flow, Lex, those kind of things, and now use a generative AI to figure out what it is the person's asking for, to capture all the fields that you needed, and then you still handle the response.
Do you
It's
think all these,
fascinating.
yeah, it is fascinating. Do you think all these big companies who were becoming sort of obsolete with their models, what are now behind chatbots, they're going to be they're going to come up with LLMs or generative AI themselves. Some of them already are, like Google. But do you think those are going to come up with solutions that actually work and replace their own products? Or
That's the interesting thing to see because I'm kind of curious that myself, like Dialogflow is one of the better um, eh, uh, platforms out there for all the intents and NLP and all that. Like, w- would you still need to use that? Like, I think over time we will see a shift to using, as just mentioned, the generative AI for that logic part. It's not necessarily like tomorrow or overnight. Like it might be over time, but I think that using that the sort of traditional intent training phrases, all that kind of model is going to go away. Like it just when you see how something like OpenAI works for figuring out this logic behind it, it is like you were saying, it's so much easier and faster to do and to capture the information needed and understand what the user's asking for, all that
and I just realized
yeah,
another thing
yeah,
for this logic. Language. We know when we train a chatbot with intents and utterances, you need to do it in every language you want to make the chatbot available in, right? So that's a
right.
lot of work and cost. But if you use generative AI, you lower those costs because it doesn't, well, if it handles the language, it can analyze what's being said and get the proper answer in the proper language.
Right, right. Yeah, that's why I think the intent model is going to go away. Once we've started playing around with using it, using generative AI to create that logic for a chatbot without having to do a whole lot. It was pretty much what I'd say. Like, you're a travel agent. You can answer airline travel questions, and we said generate the um, you know the types of questions you can answer and what's needed. And it built all that out without having to say like, oh, answer questions about baggage, answer questions about flight status, answer cancellation request. Like, you didn't have to say any of that stuff. You didn't have to come up with the training. So you didn't have to come up with what are all the possible intents? What are the training phrases around those? What are the entities within
Fallback
those intents?
scenarios.
You didn't have to do any of that stuff. Basically two prompts. It gets that starting point, and obviously, like, you do the fine tuning and everything. But just to be clear, it wasn't using this to actually respond to the user with the answer. It was using it to respond with this JSON object that then you could use.
It's behind the model.
Yeah, to have it say it however you want in your own language, or your own tone, and then that helps with that whole guardrail thing. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So within not a whole lot of time, just messing around, in the order of minutes, like 10, 15 minutes, we had this thing that, like, wow, this is actually pretty cool, to handle a travel chatbot scenario. And obviously you have to keep working on it to, you know, handle the actual responses and make it better and everything like that. But at least as a starting point, like, this is pretty cool. So I think that is truly a game changer for conversational AI, that you don't need to do those intent models anymore. And that's where, if you're like the platforms that are more focused on that, that's where I could see them being maybe a little nervous. And that's probably why you hear folks saying, oh, be cautious of using generative AI for fallback handling. And I think that's where folks are missing an opportunity. You could definitely, fallbacks are one thing, and that's where it seems like, what I see people experimenting, oh, have it handle the fallbacks. Have it take over the intent model piece instead. Like, that's actually super powerful, and you can still handle fallbacks however you want, like, what that messaging is in the fallback scenario. But I think that's where some folks are missing, and maybe I was too initially, like, using the generative AI to actually as the model itself, like the replacing the intent training phrases. That is really powerful and game changing.
Yeah, and it's going to be well, lower the cost, but also the time to market to get a bot
Exactly.
out there. Basically, you could, within a day, you could have a POC if if you have a platform. It's not that, well, I wouldn't say it's not complicated, but it saves you a lot of time and cost. Although the LLM or the generative AI also costs money, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
cheap.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's an illusion. A lot of people think, oh, we take away those costs and we're cheaper. No, but time is
Hmm.
also a factor. And I think maintenance here is the actual problem, because that's what you see when companies start with a bot. They put in a lot of time and money and manpower to get it out there. Once it's out there, then maintenance, you need to keep investing it. And I think here, if you have a proper model behind it and you keep adding information to it, sort of automatic training of the model, um, the maintenance becomes relatively simple, and you keep on generating those intents and utterances without a problem, without having to sit behind the computer and just think and generating texts, et cetera, et cetera. So it's sort of, and I think because of the language part, it becomes a bit more inclusive. So people that don't speak proper English or they speak Spanish or some other language, it's not a problem anymore. So so I think it allows you to serve your customers better without having to make the incredible cost of translating because it's expensive. Um, so yeah, I think there's a great value here if we can make it safe. And well, you apparently figured it out.
We're working on it, working on it. And then the other thing is, we're talking a lot about conversational AI, the chatbots, but the thing that got me excited about generative AI, it's not just the conversational AI part. Like folks are using generative AI for, you know, writing marketing messages, sales pitches, documents, that kind of stuff. So it's not
PowerPoint.
just, yeah, it's not just the conversation. It's like writing, like creating a content and the images. So that's this part that we're rolling out support for later this week is that the images. Is I'm curious to see how that's being used in the enterprise. Like right now, what I see a lot of the generative AI images is sort of for fun stuff, like people, whatever, making like whether they're funny images or just goofing around. But I'm curious to see how enterprises will make use of the generative AI for images. Like, would folks say in the movie industry or gaming industry make use of like, like what are the enterprise use cases there? So I'm interested to see that kind of stuff too.
Well, I think there's still a small hurdle to be taken because there's still this lawsuit going on with the Getty archive and Dolly, if I'm not mistaken, um, because it generated a picture supposedly generated by AI, but there was the Getty archive watermark in there, so they couldn't say no. It was all, we didn't steal anything or didn't use anything. So there's this whole IP copyright infringement thing going on. And I think also based on text, I think in California, I'm not sure, but there's someone who started a class action suit against OpenAI um, because it basically takes everything off the web, and there are, well, it's debatable, but there is copyright and an IP there, and it's using it, not asking permission. And there's this discussion, you need the robots.txt on your website, and then it can scrape. I'm not sure if OpenAI sticks to that or any other model, but it is a thing. And I think that's why big corporations are a bit careful or scared. Because if you use it at large scale, the financial implications, if Getty Archive loses it or wins it, sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
OpenAI loses it, then that opens the gates for more lawsuits, lots more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. There's definitely it brings up new
And
legal
with a couple
concerns.
billion dollars in the bank account from Microsoft, it's a nice target to sue, right?
Right, fair
They have
enough.
deep pockets. Um, could you show us how it works? Take
Oh,
your
sure,
tea.
sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've been
I saw you going.
yeah, I have a lot of tea here. Let's see. Oh yeah, yeah, no, I do the Earl Grey, huge Earl Grey, but then it's hot, so I have the soda water here. Let me just do this and do this.
So when did you guys start building?
In April,
Wow.
so early April. So this is yeah. What I'm showing you is the initial version that's doing the analytics.
Basically, I'm giving you the floor now. You're in charge now, right? You're telling us.
Oh yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, I should show you. So this is so once again, it's Reconify. It's analytics for generative AI. And so what I'm going to show you is the initial version we're doing that's around the text completions and chat completions. And then, as I mentioned, the image support later this week. So doing all the analytics around image creation and manipulation. So let me just go into the console here. So what you're seeing here, this is just my own demo chatbot playing around, asking questions, just so this data so you can see. But this is what you would see as your initial dashboard. It gives some of those core metrics I was talking about for generative AI. Folks are keeping track of like interactions, tokens, cost. The cost per token, if you go into OpenAI, it's fractions and fractions of a penny, like you know 0.002 cents per thousand tokens kind of thing. That's why the costs go way out there. But I'm going to pick one of the apps. So this is I mentioned the chatbot. So similar to any other kind of application, folks would want to track like how many users, sessions, the interactions, tokens, costs, that kind of stuff. This is just over the past week for my own. I can blow this up to just this, like I mentioned, a sample. So if we take a wider range,
Ah, you have
I
more
just see
to
more
show.
data in there. Um, just whenever I'm using it. Um, So then we can go into, for around the core metrics, as mentioned, so user sessions, tokens, the interactions, the latency, because depending on what models you're using, might have concerns with how the latency and the response. So
Not
keeping
only
track of all that
concerns,
stuff.
it is a problem, the latency.
Yeah,
It's one of the
and
other
by model.
frustrations.
I, so that's where this report comes in around the models themselves. So you can see um, over this time period, roughly a month here, um, the different models that I was using, um, the percentage breakdown for the interaction. So prompts are the prompts in, responses are your responses back, how many tokens on a prompt, how many tokens on the completion, meaning the response. And then you can see the average latency. So this is one of the newer versions of GPT 3.5. So this is what they just announced a little while ago, the 6.13, like June 13th. So this one is slower, but it's also generates more accurate responses, so it's taken a little bit longer. But you can get an idea like of the latency. So this is where the trade-offs come into play. Like, should I use this model or that model? But where this gets much more interesting is when you start to actually dive into the prompts and responses. So this was mentioned. Those are just core metrics. So if we take a look at the prompts, I'm going to go back to just the past week here for now. And you can adjust all the stuff like you see I'm doing for any date range, whatever you like. You can filter. So with prompts, in the case of a chatbot, there's different roles. When you create in the prompts, you can say, this is the system prompt. You are a travel agent chatbot, right? Or this is the assistant's response if you're trying to feed it like examples, like a user says this, the assistant responds like that. So you can filter any of these things based on the role.
I see at the end
Um,
here
and
sentiment.
oh
That says
yeah,
the
so
last column.
keeping track of the sentiment.
So explain me
Yeah,
how you do
the
that
sentiment analysis.
of the
This is
response of
the
the
sentiment.
customer.
Or this on this particular on these messages themselves, it's looking at the words used in the phrase, and a more negative one that has negative words. So I think critic here is picking up on a little bit of a negative sentiment. But these are the distinct prompts coming in. This is just what I was doing today, messing around, asking baseball questions. Um, so you can go into any one of the prompts and see the responses associated with it. I, I think what's a little bit more interesting though is to to do like an exploration. You can say it was going to get into these clusters here. Like this particular prompt, you're a baseball critic. Are there similar prompts that came in? So you want to analyze like how one prompt's doing, or this in this case it's a system prompt. So these are related prompts, and you can compare them. Like how is your uh, in the case of this one, you're a baseball critic versus you're a baseball commentator. What were the responses that came back? And you can compare those here. Or you can do the prompt cluster. So it's one thing seeing all the individual messages. I just shifted it to today's stuff, so there's not a whole lot to make it easier to see. But even looking at this, there's a lot to look at. So prompt clusters, what this does is it clusters similar messages together based on the semantic meaning. So you can see, in this case, Was Roger Clemens the best pitcher? Is Roger Clemens a good pitcher? Who is the best pitcher? These are all clustered together as a very similar prompt in. So I don't have to go through all the individual ones. Now I can actually see these, and I can do this explore here and do the comparison. So was Roger Clemens the best pitcher versus is Roger Clemens a good pitcher? What were the responses like? And you can start to do that comparison. And similarly, you can go the same route on the response side. So I can look at all the responses coming in. I can find similar responses to this. So I can analyze the prompts, or I can do the response clusters and explore these to see what prompts led to these things, or how do these two compare. So in this case, you were a baseball critic. Was Roger Clemens the best pitcher? You were a baseball commentator. Will Clemens be in the Hall of Fame? These are the responses. So it's just helping folks understand how their application is actually responding. And then if you want, you can go into all the individual interactions. So you can see this one was with this model, different model, and it pulls out some of the information around the tokens. If you pass in any of the additional parameters, like the temperature, any of that kind of stuff, it would show all that stuff up here. Transcripts are generated automatically too, so you can see the back and forth interaction. So this makes sense in a chatbot environment, and having the back and forth, so you can see all that.
And it does that on an individual level with an individual customer?
Yeah, so it's pulling all that out, and the way this works to integrate, because you had asked that earlier, it's meant to be pretty easy. So, as just mentioned, like some folks build their applications in Node. So there's just the npm module.
Okay.
And you would include. So here's the line to include the module, and then after
npm is Java, right?
No, JavaScript.
JavaScript. Okay.
You'd include the module, and then you would basically initiate it, passing in the OpenAI project, and then your keys, right? And so this part, that's it. That's all you have to do. There's some optional stuff if you want to track a particular user. Like here, I could override who the user is, or create my own session if I want to track sessions in a particular way. It's the same with Python. You would include the module, and then the second line here, and that's it. And some folks maybe want to do everything themselves. So there's a REST API, and then that's just the format of what the REST looks like. And it's all asynchronous, sending the data over. So it's meant to be pretty easy. And as I mentioned, we capture everything, take care of the REST for you. All the data is there. And you can see the stuff over time. Like here's over the past, the usage of both. So this is showing a roll up of both the completion chat. This is a completion. This is an actual chatbot, and you can dive into them to see the individual stats. So that's a quick overview. As I mentioned, like the next step is to add the images. So you'll see the image support. So that's later this week, and then we'll start adding the guardrail alerts as the piece after that. But at least this part lets folks know what the prompts are coming in and what the responses are out, and you can follow that trail. Like tell a joke about dogs. So if someone wrote tell a joke about dogs, here's all the responses. Right. So you can see the same input generated all these different responses. It's unstructured both ways.
And the funny thing is the sentiment.
Oh yeah.
I would assume with a joke it would be really high.
Yeah. At least it's not negative.
That's thank God it's not negative. No, but actually it's interesting because the way it's written, it's actually in a quite neutral language. So that's probably why the sentiment is, not very green or not red,
Yeah.
but it's just somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, fair enough.
What I'm curious about. Okay, let's say someone has a chatbot platform, or they're using a chatbot platform, and they want to integrate they're using generative AI and they think about it. How do they go about integrating Reconify and connecting the model and understanding what they're doing and getting better? Of course, you're introducing new features soon. That probably helps a lot because I think the guardrail is of major importance
Yeah,
because that's where everybody is stressed.
yeah, definitely. So the guardrails would be alerts. So if you saw, here's all the responses coming back. If there's a particular response, and this here, that's analyzing if there's similar responses to this one. So this response that came back, did you get any responses that were similar to this? So here's one that is. Um, so say I'm just there's not I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but if there was, say this didn't fit the the tone that you wanted, or there was something in here that was negative, or whatever, for whatever reason, you basically could say, hey, I want to flag this one. So anything that comes in that's similar to this, let me know. So in this case, you have this one already. We know is similar. So you get an alert about that. So these responses are things that you flagged for some additional review, whether that's to not allow it to go back to a user or to have a human look at it first or anything like that. That's the first step of the guardrail, is doing the alerts. And then we'd start adding more functionality to say like what to do with it, whether that's modifying it, scrubbing it, doing something else, but at least setting up the alerts to allow the developer to do what they would like to do with it as the next step.
But but you just said it's asynchronous, right?
Yeah.
Am I
Oh, the
correct?
asynchronous for the
So
analytics for tracking. Yeah.
ah, but if you would put this as a guardrail and it would be in like an active guardrail, like the generative AI is generating something and it doesn't fit within the guardrails. Um, Reconify should be somewhere in between, then becomes synchronous, right?
Yeah, for
Or
that, if you use it, so that's if you want us to take the action. So the initial part was just to do the alert. So the alert would be basically you get an alert that this is a response that was generated. And that's what I was saying. Like the first step is doing the alerts, and then afterwards we'd start doing adding functionality to take action. So in that case, you'd have to do something that
is
was
that's when it becomes really
yeah,
interesting
yeah,
or even more interesting because then you get sort of an autopilot situation, right?
yeah. So
Where you set the guardrails and you teach it what you want and what you don't want, and then you say, "Let's go." But wouldn't that also introduce an extra layer of latency?
it could, yeah. So that's if you're doing it synchronously, yeah, definitely, because it's going to wait to get the response back. So that those are all trade-offs. That was why at least the initial part is let's do alerts so you can get alerted of what's actually going through, and then the developer can do what they like with that. But yeah, the synchronous part um, would definitely add some latency.
But if you look a bit further, and let's say we look 6 months ahead, how do you see your application being standard integrated in platforms?
Yeah, so within your own apps, you can, as they're showing here, you can include the module, and then so this is was mentioned for folks using OpenAI. So you can include the module, and it's going to just take care of everything for you. So um, part of this, at least the go-to-market, is working with some of the other platforms out there to integrate in, so it's behind the scenes. If they're using OpenAI, they can integrate this module in um, to have the analytics as well. So any of the like the chatbot building platforms that are using generative AI, that's what I meant there. So yeah, it could integrate with those folks. Um, so that's part of the whole go to market.
Now it's only so we're starting again.
Yep.
Um, I'm wondering, now you're only connected to ChatGPT or
OpenAI.
OpenAI.
Yes.
Um, there's tons of models out there. What are you going to connect to all of them?
Yeah, so the idea is to look at the next ones to add. So, we just basically did the announcement roughly a week ago for this beta launch of folks to try out what's currently there, what are showing. So this is integrating with OpenAI. So we want to expand to additional models, and that's one of the benefits of this too. Like, I was showing here. Let me just go back to this real quick. If you're looking at the model usage, this is just the models within OpenAI, but comparing the models across other providers. So that's the beauty of this, is being that cross-platform. It's not just one platform. We start with OpenAI, then we add others in. So the first thing is finishing off the image support. So that'll be later this week. Then looking at the additional providers and the guardrails components will be the follow-on as you just keep expanding this. So
I'm trying to think, if I put myself in the position of OpenAI or one of the other models, if you collect all this information, you have, I don't know exactly what your business model is going to be, but you're collecting data over all the models. If you have all the generative AI models in there. And that means you have the information a little bit later for companies who want to work with the model to give actual data about latency and cost and et cetera, token usage. So you're collecting more than information just for your customers. I don't know if this is your purpose. I'm just thinking, but all that information on a metadata level could be used for other purposes, good purposes, not negative thing. Is that correct?
yeah,
Or
definitely. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, you do get a higher level view, which could be um, interesting. There's some neat stuff you can potentially do with that. Yeah, right now it's around helping the enterprises build better experiences for their customers, and then exploring how that information could be used to maybe help all the models or providers be better too.
yeah, I think you're going to the providers are gonna want your data
Yeah,
because for competitive purposes, if you introduce a new model, you want to basically you're benchmarking here. If you have all the models in there, you talk about metadata, right?
yeah, it's a possibility. Yeah, that's kind of, when I was doing this before in the conversational AI side, that was something that came up, the comparison amongst the different providers. And the thing is, you try to be neutral Switzerland and all this, be friends with everyone. So, but there is some interesting insights to learn.
Yeah, if on your website there's no cost yet. If you look at cost, I understand maybe you're not there yet because you're still in the beta version. But if a company wants to start using it, and not in the beta version, but a little bit later when you have the functionality out there, it's all tested and it works perfectly, how much would a company pay, or are you not there yet?
Yeah, that part is still being fleshed out a bit. The idea is to be a SaaS model, and pay by usage is the initial, basically how much data is going in and out. Just so it's sort of like the AWS models and everything, like pay as you go.
Okay, so based on the volume, so a big company with a lot of volume would pay more than a small
Yeah,
company.
yeah, that's the general idea. I think it, you know, yeah, AWS. That's kind of the model that was used, and people seem to understand and all. But yeah, the actual pricing is still being fleshed out.
Well,
Yeah.
that makes sense since you're still developing. we caught you in an early start,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah, no, no. I already have because we did the announcement a week or so ago. We've basically just been, each day, I, turning people on to get more folks up and running and using. And I just wanted to get feedback on the initial stuff as we're, before we just, open it completely up. So, yeah, so far it's been going pretty well. I wanted to get the images out support in before making it fully open, and then we'll be working on support for additional platforms and the guardrails after. Um, uh, but yeah, it's been a good response, and it's neat when you show a demo to the folks that are actually starting to build applications. Like, oh, I actually, this. You see them get excited, like the prompt clustering and the response clustering. So that's gets folks pretty excited because they say, "Oh, that's how the thing's actually working," and they can compare stuff. So it's pretty neat.
Well, I also think that it's great data for if you're training conversation designers to understand what's happening. This is great and valuable information.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can see because yeah, you can see how it's actually really being used. Like, what are people really saying? How's it really responding? Like, you can. I think that's the thing with at least the intent model stuff. There's only so much you can initially do to figure out, like, what are all the things someone might ask and all the ways they might ask it until you actually get the stuff out there live and see what people really do. Like, I remember the previous company, we had a really popular, well-known pizza delivery service using us, and you'd think they knew all the ways someone would order a pizza or how they ask for a pizza, and then you see when it actually coming through, and they didn't. There's ways people were asking for pizza, or the way they said what they wanted, and it was hitting fallbacks. Um,
So they were delivering wrong pizzas.
or just not understanding what the person wanted. Yeah.
So they have annoyed pizza
Yeah,
customers.
exactly.
If you look ahead, do you and I know I'm maybe shouldn't ask this question, but you think this is going to be the standard? I know you want that to be the standard, but do you think this is going to be the standard?
Uh, uh, this analytics, my analytics platform, or just the generative AI? Oh, the analytics. Oh, and yeah, I'm hoping it's one of the leading ones, and it's something that folks go to. That's the goal. I think generative AI is definitely a game changer for conversational AI, like that. Um, the way of the intent model way of doing things is going to go away, and I think that might be scary for some folks, or but this is just such a game changer in this place, this space, that for conversational AI, I think generative AI is the way to go. For that logic I was talking about, you still have to be careful on some of the responses. And then I'm really curious of how folks are using this generative AI for the other areas, the content generation, the image generation, manipulation. Like that's why this is such a wider space than just conversational AI.
That's why I'm curious because in my opinion, because you're one of the first out
Yeah.
there, you're setting a standard here, and especially since you're introducing a lot of functionality um, in the next weeks, you're sort of raising the bar and creating a standard.
Yeah, I hope so. It's through working together with folks, and getting this feedback, right, and seeing what the folks that are using it, what what's helping them, or what they would like to see too. So I know the conversational AI space fairly well. Like, that has been doing that for I don't know, 7, 8 years now, I guess. And then that's why I'm curious to see how the folks doing the other stuff, the content generation and image generation, how they'll use it, and how we can help there.
help them
Yeah, yeah,
ahead.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Basically, it's providing a better experience for their customers. That's the goal.
If you were to give advice or a piece of advice to conversation designers that are starting right now, what would your advice be? Knowing that you're building this and your view on things in terms of where the market is going. If you talk about intention utterances or hopefully the lack thereof.
Yeah, I would definitely be exploring the generative AI, say OpenAI's chat completion instead. And as I mentioned, around the logic part, you can have it generate a response for you to use, meaning that's why that example I mentioned, have it respond with a JSON object that had the entities pulled out that you needed, the confirmation tickets, any of that kind of stuff. Um, uh, I would explore with that. I still think there's a need for. I think this came up the other day. Someone asked me, "Is there still a need for conversation designers, the folks that are actually, generating the response?" I believe so. Like you still, um, need to the things you alluded to earlier, like the inclusion, empathy, that kind of stuff. Designers go a long way with helping that and designing a flow that works, that satisfies the customer, right? So it's about understanding what the customer's asking, responding appropriately, but respond in a way that satisfies them. It's customer satisfaction.
That's actually valuable. And um, I have a last thought. If you think of this out there and you think of, for instance, a live chat, I would assume that based on the live chat, you could generate, use a generative AI to create an answer and use your model to sort of filter it and have suggestions ready to implement and send it. So basically, the agent is being helped by the model and your software. Is that something that's an idea for the future?
You could like that agent assist capability. It could at least for now the first wave is the analytics, like getting the showing folks how the stuff is working so they can improve what the prompts are going in. If they're fine-tuning models, they can try to optimize those for the responses and whatnot. That's the first phase, and then I mentioned like the guardrails and the additional platform support. Um, for the agent assist, it's interesting. It's something to think about a bit, how that might fit in. I know that that's definitely a popular area. When I was at AWS, that was one of the things that they were rolling out a lot of, uh, features, functionality, like support for. It was a popular use case.
Yeah, because
I should say.
it would save so much time, or even in phone calls, if you have real-time analytics, speech to text, and then put it in the model, and then generating answers and assisting the agents. I think you would better the customer experience or up the game. You would assist the agents and make their life easier because they wouldn't have to type in and look in the company database. It's generated based on the
Yeah.
conversation. So I would assume we're heading that way. Your model could, not now, but in the near future, do that, especially if it offers guardrails. Because how many times does a customer service agent give the wrong answer?
Mm.
And then, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. Or you do something and then it turns out to be faulty. And then you say, oh, you gave me the wrong information.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that was the neat thing with at least for the IVR side of things, the voice side, what's neat is that the folks are like transcribing those calls in real time and feeding that information into, right now it's feeding into like a knowledge base, or maybe they're using a traditional chatbot environment, but you can, to your point, use the generative AI that's like targeted to your knowledge base um, to help the agents out. It's definitely a good use case.
Yeah, and that's a lot of companies.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah.
if you look for your, um, I'm really happy that you're bringing this to the market, Artie, because I think a lot of companies are going to be really, really happy and probably feel a bit more confident to use generative AI in their models to, especially with the guardrails coming, um, to start using it and get experience because it's unstoppable. We know that, and that's why they're also making legislation. And I think also the your software might help the models stay within the boundaries of the law, the new laws.
Yeah, there's so much happening. The thing, like anytime there's a new platform, this stuff, the advancements are so rapid. But in this one, it's just crazy. If you think of like in from January to now, even just
It's
yeah, it's
amazing.
absolutely amazing. Like how fast this stuff is moving, and it's just yeah, we're living in a great time. It's really. Amazing to be part of this and seeing all the technology advancements and how quickly it's happening. That's the thing, like, especially with this, because we both have that conversational AI experience. You can duplicate what some of these platforms have done with the intent models with generative AI, in a fraction of the time. Like, that's the part that if I was one of those intent model built platforms, you could imagine being a bit nervous about this.
Yeah, especially if you know how much money they've spent to build that
Yeah, yeah,
functionality
exactly.
into the
Yeah,
platform.
yeah, that's the whole thing. Like
So
you could, someone starting today using a generative AI approach could be on par functionality wise, or if not beyond, pretty quickly.
I dare to say
Yeah,
beyond
that definitely.
because usually with intention utterances, you stop at a certain amount. Okay, this is enough. And basically with generative AI, there is no end to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's exciting.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
endless
it's super exciting.
or
Yeah,
limitless. Yeah, I
yeah,
feel the same way. Um, Artie, we're not selling
yeah.
anything here. We're really, we're doing this because we really think this should be out there, and I'm really happy you took the initiative to develop this. Um, if a company sees this podcast, says, "Okay, I want something with it," um, can they get the beta
Oh, yeah,
version
yeah.
and use it to start
Yeah, if you
experimenting?
just go to reconify.com, there's a form, fill out the beta, and we've just been adding folks, off of that list. Yeah, so
Okay.
do a quick demo call with them, just partly because we're trying to get feedback from people. So we get some of that initial feedback and then turn them on and, check in with them. So, but yeah, they can just go to reconify.com and sign up for the beta, and we'll get them up and running.
We'll put it in the post saying that if they want to buy that, we'll put the link in there so
Yeah, I
they see it.
appreciate this. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be part of this and chat with you about generative AI and all. It's exciting.
Can I ask you a
Oh, yeah, yeah.
favor? If you have next features
Yeah.
in, like say in 2 months or something in September, um, we do like a short update
Sure.
call to see where you're at because I think then people will be amazed. I'm already amazed at what you have right now, but they will be amazed because probably by that time you'll have more generative AI models in there. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to get some calls from platforms saying they want to integrate you in their platform. I wouldn't be surprised at least. Um, Actually, I know probably two or three platforms that might call you. So yeah, let's do an update in September and see how far you are, and show people. We don't have to do it, make it very long, but show people where you're at, and see how this develops and how they can integrate it in their work. And maybe we can then do a demo with a actual chatbot and see what happens at the front end and then at the
Yeah,
back end,
that sounds cool.
how they could use
Yeah.
it. And I think um, um, conversation designers in who are learning and who are being trained, this should be integrated in their training to understand what's happening, and it gives you a good overview.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. No, I appreciate this opportunity, and yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Thanks for having me.
hey,
All
let's
right,
do
cool,
it.
cool.
Thank you very much, Artie, for today. And well, I guess we'll see each other in
Yeah,
September
definitely.
and do this again.
Thanks again.